everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Anita. I'm working on stories 14 and 15 today. So I'm starting 14 with a large photo of my cat Oreo and the wrapping paper I had this year. I actually had my ironing board set up, and that's kind of where I was wrapping presents when I had a chance. And I'm going to add that vellum pocket with the journaling card. There'll also be a photo in there, and I'm going to add an embellishment cluster and my number on to that pocket. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim out the photo. I'm going to speed this up because I do a lot of fiddling and it's not super complicated by any means. I'm just going to trim down that 3x4 photo. I wanted to leave just a little white border just to break it up a bit from the other photo. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted the photo facing out or if I wanted the journaling in the end. I chose the journaling. So I'm just making sure that everything fits, trying to decide where exactly I wanted to place it. And then decided if I was going to do the journaling, I wanted a little overlay on top just to, again, break it up, maybe add a little interest. So just going through these 3x8 transparencies. These are Ali Edwards from a past December Daily kit. You'll notice they have holes in them. The new ones don't. I like that much better. You can choose which direction you want them to go in that way. But I'm cutting this one down, so it's fine. It's wide enough. I just cutting the holes off essentially. So I'm just gonna write out my journaling here, just stream of consciousness. Hadn't decided ahead of time what I was gonna write. Just using a Sharpie roller pen. I like it. It writes really well. Pretty sure it's waterproof. I don't think I've actually really tested it out, but it is a nice little pen. So just writing a little bit about how I wrapped this year, where I wrapped, um, the fact that I wrapped one present on Christmas Eve, which is unusual for me. Usually I'm up at midnight still wrapping presents. And a little bit about Oreo, who also loves to wrap presents. And by wrap presents, I mean lay on top of everything and play with the paper and whatever other mischief he can get into while I'm doing it. I had decided I would wrap in my scrapbook room on top of my ironing board that I brought in, thinking that he wouldn't get up there, but he did. So hence this photo. And yeah, it turned out to be a cute little addition to the album, so I'm kind of happy about that. So here the journaling's done, and I'm just going to adhere them back to back. But I also want to add a tab at the top. So I chose one of these little red ones I think those ones are from this year's kit, maybe, not sure. Um, I'm just putting it back to back. Sometimes you can see the whites underneath, so I'm just trimming that a little bit. And I'm going to sandwich it in between the two cards here. Just taking my little glue press there. It's got Barely Arts glue in it. Just putting a little bead of glue along the top, just so I can move it around a little bit. And then putting some on the back, and then I'll use my ATG to actually adhere the cards back to back. There's that done. And then I'm just going to trim a wee little bit off of each side just to make it a little less thick so that it will go in and out or slide in and out of that vellum pocket just a little easier. Next, I'm just going to bring in some embellishments here. I've sped this up a lot just because it took me a while. I was just looking for some word strips, and I wanted something in behind that vellum star just so that it would be a little more colorful. And I found a gold one to put underneath, so that made it pop. So I'm going to use that. And then I was considering putting a a journaling strip, or not a journaling strip, a word strip along the top of the journaling card. But in the end, I think I decided not to do that. So I'm just trimming down the transparency here so it fits on top of the journaling card. It's not going to get adhered or anything. It's just going to slip into the pocket along with the journaling card. I don't embellish it in any way or anything. Just slide it in. Easy peasy. So there's that part of it is all done. Just making sure again that it all fits, just because there's a lot of thickness there and not a lot of wiggle room, but it fits pretty good. And then next I'm going to decide where and which embellishments I'm actually going to put on the pocket. I'm gonna bring out some twine here. It's actually more of a ribbon. It's a bit shiny. Decided I would add a bow to that plastic present. You saw me, there is a film on those ones. You saw me pull that off. I've cut out a bunch of this with me fiddling with a bow and whatnot. I also decided I'd like to make it look like it was hanging down a little bit. So I'm just adding a bit to the top, and I'm just going to adhere it to the back with a glue dot here. Super sped up. Didn't figure you needed to watch me fiddle around with all the little bits and bits. So I'm just using glue dots to adhere all that down, and the little bow on top. And then I'll just trim my little edges, I'm assuming, of the little tails of the bow. And then that's just going to sit there on that journaling, on the pocket, just at the top, overhanging the pocket just a little bit. And there's where I'm going to trim my little edges. I cut them at an angle so that they don't fray so much. And just fiddle in a little bit with it. And then that star, you'll notice the vellum star with the little gold in behind. That's going to get adhered kind of right where it's at. And then that journaling, or the word strip, is going to go on the bottom to kind of add a little ledge or an anchor point so that the star and the present aren't just floating in space. They look like they're grounded to the journaling block there. So I'm going to bring out some brads. I store mine, these are called watchmaker tins. I don't know if you can buy them anymore. I've had those for years and years, but that's how I store my little bits like brads and things. So I'm going to just put a brad at the top of that star. So you can see I have a piercer tool there, and I just have a foam sheet. It's just packaging from something. I'm just going to pierce a little hole in the top and punch my brad through. The foam just helps. It has something for the piercer to go into and for the brad to go down into. Being careful though, because it's a fairly thin spot at the top of the star, so I don't want to rip through to the edge. I just want to make a nice hole, and then I decided I would adhere it right to the pocket. So I just have my finger in there and just pushing the brad prongs through the one layer of the pocket. It wouldn't really matter, I guess, if you pushed through the whole thing, because you're not going to see a hole on the back anyway. But here I'm just fiddling, trying to open up the prongs underneath so that they lay kind of flat. And then you'll see me put a little ruler in there, and then I'm just gonna push that brad down and uh, onto that ruler to make it flat. Just the ruler just adds a hard surface in behind so that it doesn't, so that it will lay flat when you push on it, kind of like a stapler does. And then there's the present, and then I'm just gonna line everything back up again to see, make sure that's where I want it. And that will fit. So then the next thing I'm going to do is adhere the present down, I believe, with some glue dots again. Yep, there's that. Then notice how I push the glue dot onto the surface I want. I don't always do that, but that is the way they're intended to be used. And then you're not getting your fingers all into the glue. And then I'm just going to cut this down a little bit. So I put a little slit down the middle and then just cut in each diagonal corner into that slit. And then that will make your little flag at the end. And I'm just going to add a staple to make it look like it's stapled onto the pocket, but it's just for show. It's not really actually stapled on. And then just a little wet adhesive. The Barely Arts glue is what I'm using still. I'm just going to adhere that down, and then there's no adhesive at the very, very end, and you'll see I just kind of curled up the the little tail part, and that just gives it a little dimension, makes it look like it's flying in the air, possibly. And then I'm just going to add my number. I did decide to go with the gold numbers for I waffled for a little bit just because there's a lot of gold in that one little spot, but in the end decided I would go with that. So I'm just putting them on my little ruler there. It helps to line them up and make sure that there's enough space before you adhere them down. Although I find the puffy letters and stickers, they and numbers, they don't have really strong adhesive on them anyway. So they're usually easy to pull back up if you need to. Um, but every now and then I'll get one that it leaves a bunch of adhesive behind if I do pull it up. So I'm just fiddling, making sure I wanted the numbers to be straight, but I had planned that the star would be a bit at a diagonal. So I'm just filling with that. And then I am going to add some liquid adhesive. You'll see me bring in some plastic packaging here. I'm just dotting off the excess glue on the back so that when I adhere it down, I'm not having any glue come out the back. It's a little card making trick I learned a few years ago. I use it fairly often. And then just gonna adhere those down, kind of push them in place, and you'll see me use my little tweezers there. I'm just going around the edges. If there is any excess glue, it will usually um, get that onto the tweezers, and then I can just wash the tweezers with alcohol to get any adhesive off. And the adhesive does dry clear, so you don't really notice it. So that's it for this one for now. I'm going to add my holes and adhere the pocket down after I finish story 15, which we'll move on to next after I clean off my desk. Welcome to story 15. I'm starting with this large photo that I've cut down. It's going to have a flap for my journaling on the left-hand side. The journaling will be on that 3x8 card that I cut down with the stars. And then the pattern paper will be on the left hand under the photo once you flip it open. I did make a mistake here, and I'll explain what I did, and I will fix it later in the video. So once I realize I made a mistake. So first I'm going to cut down my paper with just like, I don't know, half an inch, I guess, overhang, because that will be the flip mechanism, like the fold. And then I'm going to adhere my photo first, and this is where I make the mistake. So I adhere the photo to the left side of the paper, but I should have adhered it to the right hand side of the paper. It's an easy fix, except using this ATG gun, like I had said before, the adhesive is not very forgiving. I did manage to get it pulled up. There are a few bubbles, ripples more on my photo, but I didn't bother to reprint. I just left it. It's not that noticeable. It's not that big a deal. Um, so the process is the same though. You'll leave your overhang, you'll use a scoreboard if you have one, or a foam like I used in story 14 there. You could use that with a bone folder or a ruler, and just to make yourself a little channel to be able to fold. The scoreboard definitely makes it easier with a bone folder, but I do have a larger scoreboard, which I would normally use for something that's a little longer, but for the purposes of videoing, it's easier with this little tiny one. So I'm just doing it a couple of times, just little bits at a time, just to make sure I'm not cracking the paper. And then once I get it to a good spot, I'm just going to fold it over and use the bone folder to get it as flat as I possibly can. Then this is where you'll see I made the mistake because my flap is going to go on the back, but I have it so that the photo is folding in on itself, not what I wanted. So here I'm just going to take it apart. So this is where my journaling will be, and then it will flip, but this is supposed to be the photo on top. So I'm just going to take, this is a Cricut tool. It's like a little spatula. It's really thin metal. So I'm just going to take that down the edges and just take it off as best I can. Now, if you were using different adhesive, like just like I know the scrapbook.com roller adhesive and things like that, they are way more forgiving. You'd be able to just pull this right off with no issues. But because the ATG is super sticky, it's more difficult. So you'll see I tore my paper, which is fine. I was more the photo I was trying to save. I guess, and I'll just cut a new piece of paper. It's not that big a deal. Um, so here it is, cut again. This time I'm going to double check to make sure I have it the right way, which I believe I do this time. So there we go. So now I have it the right way. So it should have been on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to do my score again. So always double check, I guess, is my life lesson, which I normally do, and I don't know what was going on, but I managed to mess it up. But it's okay. It's just paper in the end, and everything can be fixed if you want it to be fixed. So it works just fine. And I could have just changed it up too if I wanted, but this works. So I'm just going to fold that back up and make a nice little crease. And then we're going to adhere that on, lining that up. I don't know. I think I was just making sure that there was enough space. When you have a fold like that, you don't want it your paper to be exactly on the fold necessarily because it needs space to move. So I think I was just lining it up because I can always trim off that right side if I need to, but the left side where the fold is needs to be exactly right. So, all right. So you'll notice here I used temporary adhesive the second time around. Um, m- Probably a better idea. I should have done that from the beginning. So now that I have everything in place and all lined up, I can adhere my journaling part to the flap. So just using the ATG again. But then realize, oh, I should probably do my journaling first in case I mess up. So switching gears, I'm just gonna grab my little T ruler here and just add some lines with a pencil so that I'm not too crooked and it's not too crazy looking. And then I'm just going to do my journaling by hand. I think I've mentioned before, I like to have some handwritten journaling in my albums, but I don't like it to be visible. So wherever I can add it behind flaps or in pockets like I did in story 14, I do try to do that. So in here, it's going to overlap just a little bit. So I'm just gonna use a pencil to mark where that's going to go as well so that I'm not going over that and that all of my words will be visible. So just writing out my journaling using that Sharpie roller pen again. I've sped this up super fast just because it took a while. And then I erased my lines immediately, which I should not have done. That teal thing I'm holding is an actual eraser, but it smudged my journaling just a bit. It's not that big a deal. I write fairly lightly with the pencil, so it doesn't take much to get it to come off. So now that that's done, I can adhere that to the flap. So putting it as close to the fold as I can, but leaving a little bit of a gap just so that it will fold nicely, and just making sure everything will line up like it's supposed to. And then just going down again with that bone folder just to get a super nice crease. And I kind of go along, I think you can tell, yeah, I do. Go along the edge a little bit just to kind of make it boxy, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but I just go along the edge and it just makes that um it just makes it a little flatter. And then once it goes in the album and it's been in there a while, it will settle down and and stay fairly flat anyway. I'm just adhering my photo down again, this time with some real adhesive, making sure that's all lined up. And then I'm just going to use some scissors to trim that edge off just a little bit so you don't see any of the white when it goes next to the other photo. And then that's where that large one will get adhered to the bottom. So it looks like it's good. You can sort of see right there in the glare that the little ripples in my picture at the top in the black section, but it's not that noticeable in the album, so I'm not worried. And then I forgot I wanted to add a little tab to this on the inside, but luckily I could get that opened again and put that in. And then I'm just going to use my little tiny attacher to staple that on. So the flap is done. And then I just need to adhere my photo. I'm trying to get it as close as I can so that there's no white showing. So I'm going to use my ATG again and get as close to that edge as I can. Just do a couple of strips and then I'll use the flap as a guide. Get it as close as I can. And then just burnish it down a little with my fingers to get good adhesion. And then I found this little half circle. I believe it was from a Stories by the Month kit. I think from 2023. No, maybe no, 2024. These ones were from 2024, I'm pretty sure. Just says the story. So I'm putting that. I was going to put it along the fold, but I didn't like the way it just added too much bulk into the fold, so decided I would put it on the other side instead, just to add something to that patterned paper to break it up a little bit. And then again, burnishing a little more, just getting it to lay flat. So just cleaning off my desk a little, and now I'm going to embellish the photo a little bit. So I have that large documenting die cut, and then I wanted to put documenting December. So I have these little labels that I just got, um, finally, that I had ordered in January. These are part of the 2025 December Daily collection. So I just chose a red, one of the plain ones, and I'm going to use that stamp set. There's a there's a stamp in there that says December. That was the $5 stamp that Ali had offered this year. I love it. I think it'll be really great for years and years. Um, and then I also wanted to add a star, so I chose the little vellum kind of Swiss dot ones. I believe those were from the star kit this year. And then I will add my number onto the star. So I'm going to pull out my little Misty here, and I'm using VersaFine ink in black, and I'm just going to add a little temporary adhesive to the back of the little label there. I do have a sticky mat in the bottom of my Misty, but it's very old and used a lot, and it's losing a lot of its stick. So when I have small things like this, I like to add some temporary adhesive so I know it will stay in place. If I had enough space, I could use those little magnets that I have, but the December is going to take up most of the space, so that's why I use the temporary. So I'm just fiddling along, making sure I have the stamp exactly where I want, add some ink, um, go over it with my little press tool there, and that's done. So then I'm going to add that to the bottom. It still has a little temporary adhesive, so I'm being a little careful here not to push it down too hard. And then just lining everything up, make sure I like where it is, choosing my number. I'm going to use those little puffy ones. I'm not sure which year those are from. They're very tiny, these ones, and they're almost black, but I believe they're actually dark green. I kind of like them. So there's my number. So I'm lining them up and adding them down. And then you'll see here where it is adhered that December because of the temporary adhesive, but I'm going to pull it off and put some permanent adhesive on there, just with the ATG. Line that up as best I can, and then we'll do the documenting next. I'm going to do it with some foam tape. This is going to be super sped up because it takes a while, but I'm just cutting it down the middle to make it a little thinner here. And then I'm just going to put it all over the die cut there, making little space, like little pieces for the eye and things like that. And then once I've got all of the backings off, I'm just going to take a little wet adhesive to dot around those ones just to make it a little less sticky so that if I need to pull it up or move it around, it makes it a little easier to do so. It gives me a little more time before it adheres permanently. And then for the star, it's a vellum star, so I don't want to see the glue. So I'm just dotting a little bit behind the 15 and then a little bit behind that left bottom corner of the star because it's going to be mostly hidden behind the die cut. And once it dries, you won't be able to see it. And then that's it for that one. And see, and here I am pulling that up just a little bit, but because I put that wet adhesive there, it makes it easier and it doesn't tear the photo. And then I'm just going to line it up with the back page, making sure that I've got it fairly good, that I'm not going to have too much to trim. And then I'm just going to use my ATG to add the adhesive. I've sped this up super fast too, and you'll see me just trimming it down. I've used all the things this time around, um, just to have everything nice and even, adding my holes to both pages. And then I'm going to go back to story 14 and add that pocket on to the front side. I didn't want to add it at the beginning before I adhered story 15 down because of the bulk. I find it easier to adhere pages back to back when they're fairly flat. So if I have large things or bulky things that I'm putting on a page, I usually try to leave them off until the back side or is finished first. So I'm just using some red line tape here to adhere down this vellum pocket. Just going to take out the journaling cards while I adhere this down. Once I get all the backing off of the red line tape here. There you go. You can see the adhesive when the cards are out, but it'll be fine. They're going to be mostly covered. And that'll be it for this one. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.